What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going over my LUTs and my phone rings. Color grading for me was one of the things that took me the longest time to learn when it comes to grading log footage and getting a really pleasing look. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how I do that process, how I color grade. I'm going to show you guys the LUTs that I've made and I use on my footage. You're going to see it real time so you can see exactly what the footage looks like. I'm going to give you guys some tips on shooting log for Fuji and Sony. We're just going to jump straight into it and show you guys how it works. The most important thing really is just getting the exposure and white balance right. If you're new to video, you need to know that getting your white balance really wrong can be a nightmare. It's not like raw photos where you can just change it with a slider. There's sliders where you can change it, but it doesn't have the same effect. So your white balance is baked into the footage and you need to get your exposure right. When it comes to SLOG3 and FLOG2 footage, or really any log footage, for me anyway, I'm really taking the exposure to the point where I'm just keeping an eye on the highlights. So you can use zebras for that, or you can just use the conversion LUTs baked into your camera. Firstly, with white balance, as I said, it is baked into the footage, so you need to really get it as close as possible to get the best looking footage straight out of the camera. The clips you'll see that I'm going to color grade now have been pretty well exposed and the white balance mostly on point. I'm going to show you guys how to adjust that, but what I do is just use the Kelvin and just dial in the number. For me, that's like 5600 or 5700. 90% of the time, if I'm outside or just general shooting, you're going to be sitting around that, which is around daylight balance. You can obviously use auto white balance, but depending on the camera, you might not get the result you want. So I do recommend just setting your white balance manually. In terms of exposing the footage when you're shooting log, it's really about making sure you have shadow detail and not peeking out the highlights. That might sound obvious, but in a lot of cameras like the Sony A7 IV or anything really with SLOG3, your meter is going to be telling you about 1.5 to 1.7 stops over the natural exposure to get a good shot. For me with Fuji, I find it's a little bit different. So if the meter's reading about 1 stop overexposed, it seems to be about right. But nowadays I'm just doing it by eye and I'm just really keeping an eye on the highlight detail so that I'm not blowing that out so much. But in general, log footage does look better if it's brighter but not overexposed, so you can bring it back down. You'll get a little bit less grain, a little bit more detail. Mostly it's going to come down to you practicing and getting outside and just making sure that you're keeping an eye on that highlight detail. If you're outside on a bright sunny day and there's clouds in the sky, just make sure you have detail that you're recording in those clouds. Everything else you can kind of work around from that. So with that being said, let's jump into the computer and start grading some footage. Now I only use one LUT. It's the LUT I use for everything. I've made it to work with all my log footage. I like consistency and I don't have all these different looks that people come up with to grade footage. My LUT is made to be a clean, timeless look that you can adjust manually depending on the film or the project or the wedding that you're editing. Just for an example's sake, if I just chuck this random clip, all this footage that you're seeing here is from my A7 IV, shot on the Kando 2024 trip that Sony sent me over to on the Gold Coast a few weeks ago. So if you go down to Color in Final Cut Pro and drag Custom LUT over your clip, and then all you're going to do is go and download the LUT, whether it's my one or it's something else you want to use. If you want my one, you can look in the description and there's a link in the store. Let's find a clip here, some blue sky. So I'll just choose that and then go ProColour V1, and that's pretty much done. You can see it's quite well exposed, and you know, if anything, there's kind of a little bit of highlight detail in there, but that's what it looks straight out of the camera, and that's pretty much the look I'm going for. Most of the time I don't want to have to adjust it unless the highlights are blowing out a little bit or the white balance is off. So I'll chuck this LUT over a few extra clips so you can see how it looks in different situations. Here's one where this trip was insane, by the way. Sony just put it all on. So again, you can see here there's plenty of detail in the shadows. If I go full screen, it's like right on the edge of overexposed. If I drag that custom LUT on there and then choose ProColour V1 again, it's a little bit bright. Oh, there, I just adjusted it with the filter. So that's actually fine. If I go full screen again, it looks great. Now, if you want to adjust things, if I want to bring the exposure down or correct the white balance, I use color wheels and color curves. The main thing to remember is that it needs to be on top of this custom LUT effect. All the effects here are stacked in a way that it matters what order they're in. So if I go over here and I add a color wheels and then I add a color curves and go back to this panel, it's not going to work well if these two effects are underneath the LUT. The LUT needs to be the final thing underneath, apart from like maybe sharpening or something like that. So you just need to select those and drag them on top, and then you can start correcting your footage. An easy way to go about exposure, you can either just grab the point on the curves and just drag that down like so, or you can go to color wheels and just use the global to drag that down like that. Otherwise you can just play with the highlights. The main point I think you get is just you have to have the color wheels and color curves and any other corrections above the LUT in terms of stacking it out, otherwise it's not going to work. Now for me, I want to make the process as easy as possible. I don't want to have to keep adding color wheels and color curves to every single clip and then dragging it above my LUT. So what I do is make an effects preset within Final Cut that I can just drag onto my clips. It applies the LUT and stacks those color correction boards in the right order. To do that, again, drag your LUT onto the footage and then go to corrections. I add a color wheel and a curves. You can do whatever you like. Highlight those, drag them on top of the LUT like so. So then you have all these three here effects. You can put whatever you want in there, but this is the main correction that I use for everything. So make sure those are highlighted and then click Save Effects Preset, and then we'll name that, we'll put a star in front of it just so it goes to the top of the pile. We'll call that ProColour LUT plus adjustments, if I spell it right. And then that puts it right here. So now if I delete all the effects off that clip, I can just drag this one over and it will stack those correction tabs and the LUT underneath it. So now all I have to do is just go in and I can just drag the exposure down or change the white balance like so. And it makes it much, much easier. So again, if we have a look at some of these other clips here, here's just a random one I took walking around Gold Coast in the morning. If we drag that over, like so, it's pretty well straight out of the camera. I would say this clip's a little bit cold. These ones were in really low light situations, obviously, where Sony put on this like crazy wrestling thing. If I just drag this over, it should still work fine, and there you go. So it matches the scene because I've exposed for how I want it to look in the final image. It's not as simple, like I said, as just putting it 1.7 stops over. Here's another one, bright outdoors. If we drag that on, you can see how that looks. There's no other adjustments here other than that LUT. Probably some of your favorite YouTubers in that scene. Here's another clip. Again, straight out of the camera because white balance and exposure is accurate. All right, if we get rid of that footage, we've got some Fuji files here to play with, so I'll just import all of these and we'll just have a play through. It's the same process, whether it's Sony or Fuji, it doesn't matter. It's just gonna look a little bit different depending on the Fuji colors and the Sony color science and all that kind of stuff, but as long as the exposure and white balance is right, you shouldn't have a problem. So if I just do the exact same thing and drag that over this clip, it looks great. There's not really any adjustments that need to be made because it's exposed right and the white balance is right. If anything, it looks a little bit green to me, and I find that's quite often because the tint on car windows seems to have like this green appearance to it. So because I've got these effects stacked here, I'm just going to go to color curves, and if you're finding there's a bit too much green in your image, just go down to the green. I hold Option and then drag and click and then drag down the green until you find it's about right. And I'd say that's about there. Before and after, much better. So if we play through that, just with the LUT and FLOG2 and just taking a bit of green out of the image for that car window tint. So with this clip of Ethan here setting up his mic for a YouTube video we're making, I'll do this one manually. Manually, there's not much to it. So I'm going to go down to color, custom LUT, drag that onto the clip, go to ProColour V1, bam, straight out of the camera, done. I'm going to add those color curves this time. With the color curves, I'm just going to drag a little bit of green out of there. Let's say that's about right. Before and after, yeah, that looks good. Again, it's really as simple as that. I know you guys ask me a lot how I color grade my footage. It's genuinely just dragging my LUT onto the clip and making sure I've got it right in camera. So I'll do it again manually so you can see there's no trickery or anything. Custom LUT, no effects, ProColour V1, done. Before and after. So I hope those tips helped you guys out. Like I said, make sure your white balance is right, make sure your exposure is right, download my LUTs and get the same looking footage that I've got. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.